Good morning. This is Clarence Williams with another edition of Now and Then. I want to talk to you about the war between Israel and Iran. This is a very serious time in our history. In 2016, Iran finalized the JCPOA nuclear deal, and this nuclear deal was fostered by President then Obama and uh, what they call the P5 plus one. And the P5 included China, France, Russia, UK, United States, that's the five, and then they included Germany into the negotiation also. This P5 was the UN Security Council, and then they included Russia into it as well. But then when President Trump first became president, in 2018, he withdrew the United States from the nuclear deal that this P5 plus one had agreed to negotiate it with Iran. I'm not going to get into the details of the deal, what they negotiated. But I will tell you that President Trump felt as though that it was not adequate. And so he wanted to tear it up and he wanted to negotiate his own deal with Iran. So that's where we are now. And even, I asked the question during all of the time of President Biden, where was the negotiation with Iran? Where was that negotiating going? But now Trump is back in office in 2024. So 2025, now he want to get back into the negotiating of a deal with Iran. Why? Because he feels as though that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. Not only does he feel that, but pretty much the whole of the European Union believes that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. They believe that Iran is the source of all the instability of the European area. And so they pretty much have come out with this consensus that they are opposed to Iran. Now, Iran, Iran is not innocent. Iran is fighting its wall of grievances against the West because of what it believes that is has been unjust. Most countries, all politicians, all governments have their grievances. They see their side just like everyone else see their side. But now, what is happening? When Trump started the negotiation, it was a mutual negotiation between two countries. Now, that was one thing that really is a little bit one sided because Iran is not trusting the United States, not trusting President Trump because President Trump was the one that tore up the agreement that they had with Obama or the United States or the P5 plus one. So now he is entering into a negotiation with Iran this time which Iran is saying we really don't trust you, but we don't have no other countries involved in this negotiation. Now, when President Obama did it, it was the P5+1. They also invited Germany into the negotiation, even though Germany was not part of the UN Security Council. That seemed as though, you're trying to do something above board, or you're trying to do something that's going to last. But now President Trump decided that he's going to negotiate on his own with Iran, independent of all these other countries. Now, these other countries are in agreement with that in principle. Yes, they may have wanted to be a part of the negotiation team, but they are agreeing in principle. Why? Because the United States is the big dog on the corner, and so they are pretty much bowing down to whatever the United States says. Now that's a weak position. That's a weak position. So here they are now at the G7, negotiating and trying to decide what's going to happen with all the tariffs. But then Israel decide that they're going to unilaterally bomb Iran. Well, Trump had said we're going to negotiate with Iran, but then Iran was not agreeing to what President Trump wanted, which was that Iran will totally get rid of all of their nuclear ambitions. So President Trump gave them 60 days. You have 60 days to negotiate with us. And then he says just at the G7 that the 60 day was up. Once the 60 days was up, 61 days, Israel started bombing Iran. Israel also had told President Trump and had told the European Union, and I would also think that they had told Canada that they was going to do this. Now Israel is in the posture that we're going to keep bombing until we totally prevent Iran from being able to develop a nuclear weapon. What that simply means is that they're going to total bomb Iran. They're going to do the same thing to Iran that they did to Gaza. Then they says yesterday that they have total superiority of the air. What does that mean? That means that they can fly their planes over Iran without anyone or any fear of the Iranians shooting their planes down. They can just fly over and drop as many bombs as they wish to drop. That's what that means. But then now, President Trump is going to leave, has left the G7, going back to Washington, and the G7 countries are putting out a declaration concerning the Israel-Iran war. Well, they had it in their original plan. This is being reported now, that both sides should stand down. Both sides should withdraw from the war. The war should stop. They should stop fighting each other. And they should go into negotiation. That's what they said. But then President Trump did not agree with that language being in the declaration. And what he wanted in the declaration was that Iran should agree to negotiate, and Israel has the right to defend itself. And that's the way they put it out. Still, they are dealing or negotiating with the United States from a weak position. And that's why the United States is putting tariffs on them, because they are demonstrating weakness. And as long as you demonstrate weakness, the person that you are negotiating with is going to always have the upper hand. Now, what happened? Let's go back a little bit further now and then. After World War II, it was the United States of America that stepped in as a world healer, a world humanitarian aid provider, health provider, stability provider. And so the United States assumed that world role. And as a result of that, countries of the world start depending and looking to the United States for support or for this and for that, even for protection. And for years, for decades, the United States has been that protector. They went together, came together. They signed a treaty, a war treaty, what they call the Geneva Convention. And that Geneva Convention in 1949 stated out the pretty much the terms of war, the rules of war. That's why when you start hearing them saying they are violating the Geneva Convention, that's what they're talking about. These countries have come together and they have said, even though we may have our conflicts, there should be some rules in the conflicts that we will not do, that any country, would not do. And what happened is that the uh, the countries now that go to war, they don't honor the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention was pretty much a humanitarian agreement. Things that you should not or should be responsible or respectful for when it comes to civilian casualties or people or soldiers that you have captured, whether you should treat them humanely or what have you. So it dealt with that, you know, things that you should not be bombing, when you should not go into residential areas bombing, when you go fighting your walls. Well, Israel has been violating that Geneva Convention for years. But because of the influence of the United States of America, other countries say something but do nothing. They protest, or they say out put out a declaration that we don't agree with Israel, and Israel is doing this, and Israel is doing this, but they don't do anything about it. It's just talk. Why? Because of the United States agreement or protection of Israel. Now, during the first conflict, maybe the first and the second, you always had different sides fighting against each other. Well, now you have Russia and China siding with Iran. China is siding with Iran. Why? Because China is getting a lot of oil from Iran. Russia is siding with Iran because Russia sees Iran's enemies as their potential enemies. And so they have a neutral understandings of who is against them and who is not. But then the only thing that messed that up as far as Russia is concerned is that Russia is trying to still make a deal with the United States, but the United States is against Iran. So in the event that there is a wall or extension of the wall, where would Russia go? Pretty much know where China would go. Where would Russia go? Both of them are condemning the war or the bombing of Iran by Israel. Both are saying that's wrong. But when, let's say, the United States, President Trump now has just left the G7 and he's going back to Washington, don't really know the reason, but he tells Tehran, capital city of Iran, get out. You need to get out. Okay, immediately. What does that mean? You know, he's not telling Russia, he's not telling Israel, stop. No. What the G7 wanted to put in that declaration was tell them to stop. President Trump took that out. Why? Because now he is not dealing with Iran from the standpoint of negotiating. He is saying they need to come back to the negotiation table, but that's not what they're doing. They are now demanding that Iran stop trying to get a nuclear weapon. And they are going to keep bombing until they agree. That's not negotiation, that's force. There's a difference between negotiation and force. That's the condition of the whole world now. Why? Because the whole world, as far as countries are concerned, has subordinated themselves to the United States. And once you subordinate yourself, you uh, control your country. But when it comes to negotiation with other countries, you're weak. And it just so happened that the United States has put a president in that is more of a authoritarian than he is a negotiator. He tells Prime Minister Carney, once he first got to the G7, he tells this guy, I am a tariffs guy. What does that mean? That simply means that I don't care what you negotiate with me on, if it does not include tariffs on your country, I'm not going to agree to it. That's what that means. I've heard some people, economists say in the United States, they will agree to an across the board 10% tariffs. Well, that simply means that everything that you buy in the United States that comes from another country, you're going to have to at least pay 10% more for it. That's what that means. And when uh, President Trump agreed now to this steel company being controlled or being purchased by the Japanese, he has to put tariffs on any country that is bringing steel into the United States in order to push push up or support the steel being manufactured in the United States. And that's why he slapped another 25% tariffs on steel imports into the United States. And that's the same principle of everything. The United States will never go back to where it was. It will never go back, because if you're going to manufacture anything in the United States that was previously being manufactured abroad, you're going to have to pay more for it, because it will cost you more to manufacture it in the United States of America. Where would the wall be? Let me end up with this. There is a general consensus that people will disagree, that countries will disagree. But World War III is going to come when countries disagree and do not have the integrity to sit down and negotiate together. As long as one is trying to force another to do something, there will always be walls, and there will always be allies that is going to side one way or the other with their allies. And that's going to end up in World War III. This is Clarence Williams, and this is another edition of Now and Then. Have yourself a great day.